So our third talk of the session is going to be on designing for the better by taking users into account a qualitative evaluation of user control mechanisms in news recommender systems. And it's going to be presented by Jaron.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I think it will be an easy point to make with this crowd that recommender systems are wonderful products helping a lot of people deal with an information overload. It's for no reason that we see them deployed in a wide variety of contexts, from commerce, entertainment, but also information. And while recommender systems have great promise, they also raise a lot of societal concern. Think of widespread filter bubbles, the reduction of diversity, but also more general concerns about the transparency of the workings and objectives of recommender systems, and the little ways that users can actually intervene or alter or control their operations. Now, these concerns do not stand alone, but are closely connected to wider societal discussions about the legal, ethical, and societal implications of the rise of algorithms, AI, and big data. Legacy media corporations have increasingly followed social media platforms in using recommender systems to keep their customers engaged on their platforms, mostly by suggesting personalized items of news. And while in the film or leisure industry, maybe perhaps less controversial, these recommender systems in the information context have gathered a lot of criticism and critique. Next to creating filter bubbles, we also hear nowadays that they've been fostering radicalization through prioritizing extreme or controversial content, just in order to keep users on their platforms. Now, this moral panic is not for no reason. The way people have access to information is important to our democracies, which all rest on the idea of an informed public deliberation. So when recommender systems would limit or bias the selection of information people get to see, this is of great societal concern. Now, this is why the multidisciplinary research project Fair News came about. How does the increasing personalization of the news actually look like? What are its potential consequences? How do different stakeholders involved regard this development? And what societal and technical solutions can we invent to mitigate those concerns? So, in this project we work together with two different universities and a stakeholder partner. RecSys is the largest media conglomerate in the Netherlands. And we did several projects. So there was an ethnographic research project that was following the machine learning and AI specialist working at that company. We also had computer scientists working on a simulation model so that content providers could test the effects of different recommender algorithms on different diversity metrics. And we did news consumer research. This is what I will be speaking about today. So we wanted to know more or less how do they regard the rise of recommender systems, what are their concerns and hopes and interests, and how do they think of certain solutions. So the first study that we did actually revealed that news consumers mostly fear the loss of control with the rise of recommender systems. They feared recommender systems sidestepping human creativity and the ability to explore the news with an informed, context-aware mind. So this is why we decided to follow up on this idea of user control. But the focus on user control is not merely empirical. There's theoretical reasons or normative reasons as well that we decided to focus on. We argue that enhancing user control mitigates many of the aforementioned problems at once. Besides empowering users to make recommender systems more responsive to the interests and needs of everyday people, it simultaneously requires these systems to be more open and transparent and explainable. And this makes users not only more satisfied and trustful of recommender systems, but people are also activated to explore beyond known interests, and that increases diversity of recommended items. And it also lessens algorithmically induced blind spots or filter bubbles. Now, what we did was we built a news recommender prototype with 3 levels of user control. At the input level of the user profile, at the process level of the recommendation algorithm, and at the output level of the list of recommendations. We organized 4 focus groups, or think-aloud sessions, with newsreaders from this media conglomerate to understand how they qualitatively evaluate these control mechanisms. Now, this study has a qualitative research design, which is still rare in this field. But even from a technical perspective, it is important to incorporate the live world of future users in the design of recommender systems. And qualitative research highlights diversity. It aims at diversity. Generalization is not the main goal. It's geared towards making distinct positions clear, so that future qualitative studies can test these across different populations, larger populations. So here's how it looked like. It sort of resembles a typical modern news website with editorial ordering on the left and a recommended for you section on the right. And there's 3 different control mechanisms. Let me see here: user profile, recommendation setting, and the filtering. When you click on it, they pop up, and you can adjust your preference. So to give the example of the user profile, here the users could see their reading history in very rudimentary forms. This was just to inform them about the possibilities. In practice, you will have more granular possibilities. The idea is that how we work, let's see, go back. Yeah, so every alteration actually generated a different list of recommendations, so that users had a concrete idea of how it actually worked. Now, we collectively tried and reviewed these different control mechanisms. And we systematically asked about different aspects about the easiness of use, the feeling of being in control, and actually if they wanted to use that. So first, some general observations. While these recommender systems were seen as a useful innovation in the news domain, our efforts were also sometimes met with distrust. Who is actually being served here, they asked. Isn't this just an illusion of transparency and control? But respondents also emphasized that such systems were mostly useful when you have really large quantities, so it's maybe more applicable to news aggregators than single news websites. And at last, they emphasized how control settings really need to be intuitively designed, and preferably in line with the recommendations given, because otherwise they would be one click too far. More specifically, at the input level, participants very much appreciated obtaining an intelligible overview of their reading history. Such overviews are normally not really given to users. And they argue that they find it interesting to learn more about themselves, and also to use that information to monitor themselves over time in order to improve themselves. So what am I reading so far? Am I stuck in a filter bubble? What do I need to read more? At the process level, participants reacted rather enthusiastically to the possibilities of controlling the recommendation process by choosing from different pre-configured types of recommendation algorithms. They found it an easy, fun, and powerful way to exert influence over recommendations. And it's an easy way to break out of your filter bubble with just one click. Now we showed both descriptive recommender algorithms like collaborative filtering and more anthropomorphized types of recommendation algorithms, like the diplomat who would bring you news from the ideological other side. Now, what was interesting that some of the participants really liked these intuitive, human-like recommender algorithms and found them creatively imagined and more inviting than those technical ones. For others, they were actually more vague and obscuring what they really do. At last, the possibilities to control the output were met with the least enthusiasm, especially since people regarded not to be really in control. In the end, they didn't alter the recommendations given, merely their ordering. As such, it was seen as a nice feature, but not sufficient to give people the feeling of control. Now, what became clear is that there is indeed a strong desire among people for having more control over recommender systems, arguably spurred by recent cases of data breaches and sensational media stories about AI taking over humanity and being out of control. Enhancing user control is an important strategy to mitigate those concerns, but it is also expected by policymakers and data protection authorities. Giving something back of the pervasive data collection practices is a much appreciated, but also an important step in the restructuring of the digital economy towards a more fair market and society. Our example of dashboards with meaningful information about the reading behavior of people is a great way to proactively comply with current data protection regulations regarding the right to receive information. The other conclusion I would like to give home is that it makes good sense to think about how to design recommender systems that can actually activate people and support their autonomy and creativity, instead of simply suggesting the items with the highest success rates. Then people could use these systems actually to develop themselves and to achieve longer-term personal goals, which in the end may be a very noble goal for recommender systems designers. Now, I hope to have shown here today why qualitative research, highlighting a diversity of viewpoints from people's everyday experiences, is an important contribution to computer science. And this talk was way too short to actually show much of the empirical richness, so I will invite you to read the paper. Thank you very much.
Questions?
Thank you for the talk. Question, and I apologize in advance if you already answered this. Did you have a specific definition of diversity and filter bubble? Because I think we all have an idea of what it is, but we might have different exact definitions. Like, my idea of what a diverse set of recommendations is might be different from yours.
Yeah.
And my idea of what the filter bubble effect might be different from yours. So when you're approaching this, do you have a specific, concrete idea of what you meant by that?
Yeah, so of course diversity is a very multidimensional context, right? So there's diversity of authors, of actors, of ideological perspectives. So in all this, in the research we approached it like very general. So the idea that they can encompass like different viewpoints. I think mostly viewpoints here than actor or content diversity. But it is very complex, and if you actually have another AI specialist working on measuring the diversity of the news that is out there, and then you see that you run into problems. Because style, emotion, there's so many different aspects that you can count as diverse. But I think from a political perspective or a societal perspective, the diversity of viewpoints, ideological viewpoints, is here most important, and maybe also representation of different people in articles. But that's up for discussion.
Thank you. More questions? Here, and then there.
So I apologize if this question is coming from a US perspective, but it's not at all clear to me that given user control, people will actually choose diverse news sources. There may actually be people who are like, crank that thing all the way over to the people who agree with me and never move it. So is that actually something that you want?
Well, to give an example or like an answer that actually relates very back to the US, where a laissez-faire approach to user control would indeed imply that the user would have all choice to go into a certain direction, but the choice design of such systems could also be in a way to visualize different perspectives, and of course the user in the end chooses. We don't want to manipulate any people into a certain direction, but you can make this choice architecture such that for example, different political viewpoints become visible, and the user can choose from that. So only to make it visible is something different than what happens today when they don't even come up in a newspaper or recommendation list. But yes, we need to keep people free to choose whatever they like to read, of course.
So you already answered my questions about you concluded that the users, they wanted more control. Did they express what kind of control? And will you be following with the second study in that area?
Yeah, so the kind of control, so it really comes from the idea that the sort of the fear of a computer taking over, right? That out of a sudden you're browsing the news by yourself, and all of a sudden you don't have an overview anymore. So the idea that you can actually still select what you find interesting, and also because it's more context dependent. Like if you came across a Finnish person yesterday that had a wonderful talk about their society, out of a sudden you have a new interest that these computer or that the systems would have not inferred yet. So they want to be able to sort of constantly select items that are relevant for them at the moment. This project, however, has been finished, so there will be no future research on that, at least for now by us. Thank you.
There's another question here.
I was just wondering if you think there's a gap between what people report themselves in these questionnaires, like when you're asking them, versus what you will see in the real life. Do you think that it maps out directly, or do you think there's a gap? What would that be?
Well, there will definitely a gap between what people say and what they actually do. But as we heard also this morning, the fact of focusing on what people only do limits, if you only take that, it would limit the possibilities that you can give to people. So if you open up the range of possibilities, even if they will not do it now or never, you still make greater the range of possibilities that they can act upon. So instead of limiting, you open it up. So in that way, even if people would actually not do it in the beginning, this is an empirical question to see how it turns out in the long run. But making these possibilities happen would be important. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Let's thank the speaker again.